Izowamfishane, President. Thanks, Minister of Labour, Minister of Social Development and Deputy Minister of Labour, the leaders of the constituencies and all the invited guests. It gives me this pleasure to introduce the keynote speaker for this signing ceremony, whose fingerprints were all over this legislation long before he signed this into law. Whilst he was the Deputy President, he was given the responsibility to oversee the introduction of the national minimum wage. He ably steered the negotiations between the social partners over the course of more than 2 years to arrive at an agreement that is going to make a significant difference in the lives of more than 6 million country's lowest paid workers. So in managing this process, he used his extensive experience as a union leader, a constitutional negotiator, and a business person to great effect to bring together these diverse views and interests. Now the President, as President, he has taken on the responsibility of organizing the social partners behind the effort to mobilize the investment, grow the economy, and create the decent jobs that our people need. Well, as already mentioned, it's worth mentioning again that as the co-chair of the ILO's Global Commission on the Future of Work, he is contributing to international effort to seize the opportunities of technological change for development, employment creation, and inclusive growth. With that, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa to deliver his keynote address. The floor is yours, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's be seated, please. Program Director, Minister of Labour, Minister Mildred Oliphant, Ministers and Deputy Ministers of the Cabinet of the Republic of South Africa who are here, leaders of labour, business and communities, Bishop to our Minister Mildred, uno Bishop wakhe. I'll also have my own bishop one day. And workers of South Africa and compatriots, it was here in Kliptown in 1955 that the Congress of the People declared for all our country and the world to know that there shall be a national minimum wage for all workers. Now, over 6 decades later, we have gathered here at this historic place to sign the proclamation for the introduction of the country's first national minimum wage. It is quite a historic event. If we cast our eyes and our minds back to 1955, when our forebears gathered right here in this spot to craft and adopt the Freedom Charter, a Freedom Charter which became the lodestar policy document that fired up thousands and millions of people around our country to be committed to the struggle against apartheid. Many of the leaders who were involved in the drafting of that document, one of whose components was to call for a national minimum wage were arrested soon after the adoption of the Freedom Charter, and they were charged with high treason. For it was declared by the then government that the adoption of a document which enshrined the basic rights of our people, including the right to a national minimum wage, was an act of treason. They were subjected to a very long trial and finally were acquitted. It was seen as a communist-inspired document, and all it ever sought to do was to give the people of our country who were oppressed under the yoke of apartheid their basic human rights, and one of those was a national minimum wage. And today, we are making history that decades, more than 6 decades later, we are fulfilling the promise that they made, the aspiration that they had in their hearts and in their minds to have a national minimum wage. Today, the national minimum wage is here, and it is here to stay. So we are here to declare that from the 1st of January in 2019, the national minimum wage shall be introduced. No worker in South Africa may be paid below the national minimum wage. Now, this is a great achievement for working people of South Africa who have endured decades of exploitation. It is a great achievement for the labor movement, which has placed this fundamental demand at the center of its struggle for better conditions for workers. Now, the national minimum wage should be seen as an achievement for business as well, for it demonstrates the commitment of employers to fairer wages and better working conditions for their own workers. It is a great achievement for a young democracy that is striving to overcome the legacy of poverty and severe inequality. Today's signing ceremony is the culmination of years of intense deliberations amongst the social partners. And let it be clear that this national minimum wage did not arrive on a silver platter. There was a lot of struggle that was engaged in and a lot of talking, negotiations that ensued. There were areas of divergence, of serious disagreement, and there were also moments of setback. There were also strikes that were embarked upon, and a national strike was also threatened, where labor felt that if they did not achieve their objective, they would embark on a massive national strike. There were moments when business felt that they should walk away from this process, because in the beginning, business felt that they could not afford it, it would bankrupt a lot of businesses, and that they could not sign a suicide letter, an agreement for a national minimum wage. At the community level, the community organizations felt that members of the community broadly in South Africa had for a long time labored under poverty, and they saw the national minimum wage as an agreement that would lift many of our people out of poverty. So a combination of all this seemed to produce a cocktail which was going to result in total failure. Yet, at the most, difficult of moments, the parties were united by a shared desire for a more equal and a more prosperous South Africa. In this sense, the national minimum wage represents the triumph of cooperation over conflict, of negotiation over confrontation. Much as many were tempted to go the path of confrontation, they always pulled back and knew that the best way to resolve problems, and this national minimum wage was one of the problems that needed to be resolved, they knew that it could only be best resolved through negotiation. The national minimum wage does not stand alone. It is an important part of a broader engagement among social partners on how to reduce wage inequality and promote labor stability in South Africa. It is part and parcel of the amendment to the Labor Relations Act. And it is part and parcel of having crafted a code of good practice so that we are able to stabilize our labor relations architecture, so that when there are differences, the role players are able to sit down and move from confrontation to negotiation and move from conflict to cooperation. It is a decisive step towards the achievement of a national minimum wage, where we are beginning to countenance the establishment of a living wage. So this national minimum wage is a stepping stone. And in fact, we have said this is the beginning. It is a stepping stone towards having a living wage. When the social partners met in Ekurhuleni in 2014, they all agreed that we needed to have and move towards a living wage. The principle has been accepted, and everything has to be taken at its own time and its own step, and the phases will unfold as we move ahead. Today, we have achieved quite a historic step by adopting, and today we are going to promulgate the date when the national minimum wage will commence. We have heard the voices of those who say the starting national minimum wage of 20 Rand an hour is far too low. Yes, there are voices that are saying that. We agree. It is far below what we would want for the workers of our country. But we must understand that in setting the starting level, the social partners sought collectively, and this was not an imposition by anyone. It was not an imposition by government. It was not an imposition by business. It was not an imposition by labor or indeed community-based organization. The social partners themselves, and may I add, it was not even an imposition by the advisory panel that I appointed, and it was not an imposition by any research from any university. The social partners themselves sought and wanted to strike a balance between the need to measurably improve the income of the lowest paid workers in our country and the need to sustain and increase levels of employment. Now, it is important that this balance should be understood. And of course, everyone, as I've often said, would want a national minimum wage which is way above 15,000. But at the same time, we've got to look at creating a balance to be able to sustain the need to increase the levels of employment. Now, some who don't really care or don't seem to care about the levels of employment and how many people would lose jobs are saying this is a starvation wage. And we agree that 20 rand an hour, 3,500 rand is not a living wage. It is a start, and everything has to start somewhere. The social partners themselves collectively agreed on this level because the available evidence also showed that it would not lead to widespread layoffs. It would not lead to widespread closure of companies, but at the same time would increase the earnings of as many as 6.4 million workers in South Africa. And that is the cohort that we all sought to focus on. That this national minimum wage would lift the earning levels of more than 6 million workers who are currently earning way below this 20 rand an hour. It is structured to make a real difference in the lives of ordinary South Africans without negatively impacting the economy. We should expect that this additional income will contribute to greater consumption and higher demand, contributing in turn to greater economic growth and even more jobs. If implemented comprehensively with appropriate use of exemptions and other safeguards, we see the national minimum wage as an instrument of economic stimulus. We need, yes, to understand that there will be those employers who will say we are not able, particularly those who are employing the 6 million workers, who will say we are not able to live up to this 20 rand an hour. There will be those. And we have built into the legislation that they will be able to apply for exemptions. And we need to understand, and this was researched by a panel of experts, and there was plentiful research also in a number of other institutions, where it was found that there are still many, many workers in this country, 6 million and more, who are still earning, yes, less than 20 rand an hour. Some of them are still earning as little as 7 rand an hour and even less. And this dispensation is going to be to their advantage. The national minimum wage takes effect in the 25th year of our democracy, and that is part of its historic impact. A quarter century in which the rights of workers have been progressively enhanced and improved and entrenched as well. The working conditions of workers in our country have been improving progressively over the past 25 years. The conditions under which our working people work today are far different from the conditions that existed 25 years ago. For a start, workers in our country did not even have the right to strike. Workers in our country were even compelled to work in dangerous places. That has improved exponentially. In giving effect to the Freedom Charter, we have put in place legislation to provide for trade union workplace organization, collective bargaining, the principle of equal pay for work of equal value, improved health and safety, affirmative action, skills development, yes, the right to protest, and all that. These achievements fulfill a global commitment to the achievement of fundamental rights and freedoms. Earlier today, in fact, just over an hour and a half ago, I attended the celebration of the 70th anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that was being held at Constitution Hill. Now that too was a symbolic spot. Symbolic in that it was on that Constitution Hill where the number 4 prison was, where the rights of many of our people were violated, and where Nelson Mandela, Mama Winnie Mandela, Mama Sisulu, and many others were incarcerated and detained. And it is at that spot where today we held the 70th celebration of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And today, a few hours later, we are here in Kliptown, where the Freedom Charter was adopted. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and to protection against unemployment. And more importantly for us today, it continues, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for themselves and their family an existence worthy of human dignity. As we gather here in Kliptown, let us reaffirm our shared commitment to ensure that all the people of this land may achieve an existence worthy of human dignity. And let us do so mindful of the past that we are working very hard to correct, and the future that we are equally working hard to build. For as we celebrate the great achievement of a national minimum wage, we need to acknowledge that the world of work is being transformed on an ongoing basis. This world that the millions, the 16 million people who work in our country are toiling in every day is being transformed. Technological advances are having a profound effect on production, on employment, on governance, and on social relations. And those profound changes are going to affect the livelihoods of working people. Many of the workplaces of tomorrow will be unrecognizable. In fact, many of the workplaces of today are transforming on an ongoing basis. Occupations that have been around for decades will cease to exist. These changes are also being driven by forces like climate change, the demographic shifts within and between countries. These changes present significant risks for a country like ours, with a high unemployment rate, with the low skills base that we have, and widespread poverty. So we are at risk. We are exposed to huge risks as the world of work globally continues to change, influenced by technological changes and influenced also by climate change. And unless we respond appropriately, this technological change, which is underpinned or wrapped around by this concept called the Fourth Industrial Revolution, could deepen inequality in our society at the very moment we are introducing measures like the national minimum wage to reduce it. It could deepen unemployment and leave those without appropriate skills languishing on the margins of the economy. Yet, at the same time, This very fourth industrial revolution also presents great prospects for progress and inclusive prosperity. It can be a driver for economic growth and development, and it can also be a driver for inclusive economic growth. It holds the promise of new and better jobs. Jobs that are more fulfilling, better paid, safer, and healthier. And it responds also to what we yearn for, what we want to see. We want to live in a country of highly paid workers, workers who earn high wages, who are productive, and workers who are able to support their families. This industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, presents countless opportunities to deploy technology to address social problems and solve developmental challenges. It could reshape the relationship between work and life, between learning and earning, if, as South Africa, we are to avoid the risks of the changing world of work and instead seize the opportunities, then we need to start immediately to ready ourselves for these changes. We need to approach this challenge as we have approached so many others, through collaboration and partnership. And if there ever is a need for this consensus-building platform that we have constructed, where the role players who demonstrated so well in crafting the national minimum wage, that these role players can work together and address the challenges that we are going to face as we confront the fourth industrial revolution. If we do so in a collaborative and partnership manner, there is just no reason why we will not be successful in taking out of this fourth industrial revolution what is best for us. In the same way, we worked together to introduce this national minimum wage. We need to organize ourselves as social partners to prepare for this new world of work I am talking about. We should not allow the technology to determine our future. Minister Oliphant said earlier that I've been made the co-chairperson of the future of work at the International Labour Organization, working together with the Prime Minister of Sweden. And in January, we are going to be releasing a report to the world about how we should be confronting the future of work and how all these risks, but also opportunities that I've spoken about, should be addressed, should be managed, the risks should be mitigated, and the opportunities should be exploited. This means that for ourselves, as we continue the collaboration, we must adopt policies and build institutions that can direct, regulate, and mediate the uncertainties of a rapidly changing world of work and economy. It means that we must invest more in the capabilities of our people, providing them with the means to acquire skills, but more importantly, to reskill those who may not have appropriate skills for these new technological moments that we are going to encounter, but also to upskill, to improve those skills exponentially. We must give real effect to the notion of lifelong learning, because the skills you acquire in your 20s may be different from those that you will need in your 40s. But they may also be different from the skills that you will also need when you are in your 50s. So it is important that we too here in South Africa should embrace this concept of learning. The world is embracing that, where all of us are called upon. Find something that you can learn. Find a skill that you can learn. Find something that drives you with great passion. And our government is laying out a number of opportunities through community colleges, through a number of other learning institutions. And a number of NGOs are also opening up opportunities for people to learn new skills on an ongoing basis. I would like to see the majority of us in our country embarking on a lifelong learning journey, because you never really stop learning. You learn and learn and learn until you leave this world. We will need to assist people through several periods of transition, as established industries are disrupted and as occupations also disappear. It is important that companies should have this approach of supporting, assisting, upskilling, reskilling people, rather than just throwing them out as new technologies come about. Because by so doing, we will be giving them pathways to move into either professions, other modes of work, and all that. And another area that is opening up in a huge way, which we have also looked at the ILO, is community work. It is social work, where now we are able to gather skills to be able to do good works to one another. We need to be spreading all that throughout our various communities. This demands the undivided effort of government and business, labor, and various structures of civil society. It demands that we act decisively, but it also means that we should act with urgency. What it does do is to impose a duty on the part of NEDLAC that we should immediately get to grips with the future of work and see how best we can confront this new fourth industrial revolution. At the government level, as I said earlier this year at the State of the Nation address, we're going to be establishing a commission that is going to focus its attention on the fourth industrial revolution and prepare our nation for the various challenges and risks and opportunities that we are going to face. It will be announced shortly. With the introduction of the national minimum wage, we are establishing a firm platform for a social pact or a social contract on the future of work. We must sustain economic opportunities of the near future. Allow me, in conclusion, to thank our partners in NEDLAC, labor, business, and indeed government in its various departments for the outstanding hard work that they breathed. With their work, they were able to breathe life into the national minimum wage. Union leaders, business leaders, community leaders, and government officials and ministers continued over the many months to work through various task teams, various committees, and also the Committee of Principals to finally arrive at the national minimum wage. I'd like to thank them because their dedication and their hard work has resulted in what we are going to sign for promulgation today. I also wish to thank the advisory panel, which was chaired by Professor Imran Valodia, for its valuable and outstanding research and considered recommendations. I thank them because they did help to shine a light on this very complex issue of minimum wage. As we were negotiating, I kept saying to everyone that it took a number of countries, I think it took Germany almost 10 years, it took a number of other countries many more years than what it took us. But we were able to get there. And I know that some of you were subjected to insults like I was as we were trying to arrive at it. In Parliament especially, the insults were plentiful, saying that you are sleeping on the job, you are not completing this process, but finally we have done so. Most importantly, I want to acknowledge and appreciate the contributions made by South Africans from all walks of life during the extensive consultation of the minimum wage. Consultations were broad and thorough through various provinces, and I know that the various organizations, labor, business communities also discussed this extensively in their various structures, conferences, and all that. And all that has contributed to this wonderful end and conclusion. And today, therefore, we are fulfilling a promise that was made over 60 years ago by the representatives of our people at this very ground. This very ground, over 60 years ago in 1955, they got together and said this is what they wanted. It is a bit late in arrival, but as they say in the classics, it's better late than never. And today we have a national minimum wage. Today we are making a new promise as the representatives of the social partners to build a new world of work in which all may realize their potential, and more importantly, none may be left behind. I thank you.
A big hand once more, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. President. Thank you very much. You have given the direction those who have ears have heard, except those who do not want to hear. Why we have negotiated this